to Causing the Effect, a podcast focused on the exploration of your mind, body, and spirit.
Yo, what's going on, Causing the Effect community? Thank you guys so much for joining us from the YouTube channel. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Working some good technology today. I got the upgrade on the camera. I am excited to be joined by another New Yorker, another salesman, Mr. Ron Karr. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Scott. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing not as good as you. Ron was transplanted to Florida like I should be doing.
Yeah, it's a blue sky, 78 degrees, no humidity.
Man, good for you. Good for you. Good idea. One day I'll get over there. But just so everybody knows, Ron is the author, best-selling book, lead seller, Get Out of the Way. And we're going to talk a lot about his newest book, The Velocity Mindset. Now, we're going to get to the sales. We're going to get to the Velocity Mindset. I want to know about little Ron. Now, I read that your father was a Holocaust survivor. I read that, you went through some challenges as a child. Now, let's just start with as much or as little as you want to get into that. And what did that look like? What did Ron's childhood look like?
Well, it's actually an easier story to talk about in the last month. And I don't mean easier in terms of it wasn't that bad. It's easier in terms of it's living right in front of us again with Ukraine.
Sure.
So, you see all the people being pushed out of the country that they love, all the trauma that's being caused. So people can actually realize what I'm saying by watching the current events. So they'll get a better feel for it. So, the war breaks out in World War II. My dad was part of the Polish army. He lived in Poland.
Wow.
Got shot a couple of times. They disbanded the army. And he sees what's happening, so he goes to get his mother to come with him so that they can get the hell out of there. His parents were unique. They were divorced. People don't get divorced at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So his father already went to Palestine. So his mother refused to go with him because she was sickly, and she said, "I'll just slow you down." And he said no, and she made him go on his own. So that in itself, knowing that you left a parent there who didn't make it at the end, I'm sure there's a lot of guilt with that. And then as he was trying to get out, he got put into a Siberian camp by the Russians. He was in hard labor for 2 years. And then eventually he got out and made his way to Palestine. In the hard labor, there was a day when he had 4 different guards come to him, put a gun to his head like they were going to execute him. And then they got called away to doing something. So, there was a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD going on. So you have that, it's hard. I know that Spielberg was doing a lot of studies, and it's been documented that kids of the Holocaust survivors, especially the ones in the camps, tended to have some abuse in their families because of the trauma that they go through, because of the anger that it brings up, because it's hard to regulate your feelings. And I think also on the part of my father, he loved us very much. He just wanted to create an environment that give us a different life. He didn't want us to ever go through what he went through, but what he did in actuality is he recreated a prison at home, a prison that was rife with total restrictions that inhibited your ability to grow and develop relationships and gain confidence, but also if you didn't do what he wanted, he would obviously lose it a few times and do things that you just don't do to kids, especially in today's age. So that left me very insecure young man going into my early life. And it took me quite a few years to figure things out and get to where I wanted to be. And that's the story. So, I obviously learned a lot of hardcore life lessons early on. And I've used it to my personal gain in terms of understanding what makes people tick, having those experiences, which put me further ahead of other people. When I realized that was really a power and not a limitation, that's actually when my career started taking off, because I started accepting it and harnessing it.
Yes. Now I love that you were saying that, because that's what I was thinking, Ron. Just so you know, so I don't have as rough as the childhood as you did, but growing up, I thought my father was selling coffee. And then he disappeared when I was 6. He was not selling coffee. You could imagine, in Brooklyn. He was in the mafia, had to go in a witness protection program. I found this all out 2 years ago when my grandfather got out of jail. My father put my grandfather in jail, put him for 20 years. So he told me all this stuff and I was like, holy crap. And up until that point, I was looking at these things like things that hindered me. Now, when did you start really realizing that these things are like your comeback power? That's your perseverance. That's your go get it attitude. Like you really can't be stopped. When did that start kind of evolving for you?
That's a great question. Well, there's a two-part answer. One has to do with my own anger. There's still today things that, I just don't give up because we're human. But when you start giving away that anger and having some empathy as to what was going on, and then understanding, when you have anger, you cannot see the gains you may have had in a certain situation. When you have anger, it makes you blind to a lot of things. When you get rid of the anger or go through whatever you have to go through to work through the anger, that's probably a better phrase, when you work through the anger, and it's not limiting you or holding you hostage as much, you then can think about other things, like what you're appreciative for, what things do work, and okay, you had a terrible situation. What can you gain from this, and how can it help you? So for me, what that environment really did for me was a superpower. Was I knew how to negotiate my way in life because I had to negotiate every day to avoid getting the crap kicked out of me. All right, and that made me a great salesperson. That made me, as a matter of fact, the sales process that we talk about today that made me very successful was teaching people how to always find another door, because I couldn't give up, because I had to find a way to avoid getting his wrath on me. You know what I'm saying? So I had to find different ways to have the argument and so forth. So that came from that. And that was a great, upbringing with that experience. It was a school of hard knocks, if you will. But then the other thing is, I have ADD. So now I've studied ADD. And ADD, for all intents and purposes, could be related in genes. But according to some experts, you can have two people with the same kind of genes, but one has the ADD and the other one doesn't. And the reason is because the ADD many times is kicked off by their environment early on. So the environment that I was on, actually kicked off my ADD. And so if I lost my attention, or, it was when I started realizing I got upset with myself a lot with the ADD, because I couldn't focus, I couldn't do this. And I look at that as something else that's wrong with me. But then I saw some of the CEOs who had ADD, and all they did was just create an environment that got the best out of them so they can do the greatest job that they were put there to do. And for me, my value to my clients, especially my consulting clients, is I'm always 5 steps ahead of them. Because if someone says something to me, my mind goes in 5 different directions, like, some kind of, sensor, if you will. And so I can see what things are not making sense in my mind. And then I start asking questions, and then I start pushing them. And then all of a sudden they start realizing maybe the way they were looking at it is not the right way. And the day that I started owning that is the day that now I was successful up to that point. So don't get me wrong, but I can tell you my success even went higher because I wasn't afraid to challenge people. I wasn't afraid. I just started trusting myself. And when I started trusting myself and leveraging the value of the ADD, that's when I really started going forward. So the message to your audience is simple. We all have issues, okay? Instead of looking at how the issues are limiting you, look at what you can gain from those and how can they actually be your secret power.
Beautiful. And now ADD mixed with anger, that can get a little convoluted. Now, I'm more curious for myself here, Ron, because, I'd say people have known me. I get a little angry. How did you diffuse the anger? And is that something that kind of comes with age? Was there a practice you were doing? Was it more just being grateful? What did that look like?
Well, it's not just anger. It's also trust. Do you trust anybody? I had trust issues because I had a relationship in which you're supposed to be safe and everything else. And then obviously you didn't know when you were going to get the next bomb thrown at you, literally. So there was trust issues. There was anxiety issue because I was always living on guard. I mean, it's the same thing. These poor people going through the Ukraine, we feel it with them. That's why everybody's so supportive of them. So I think when we look at anger is associated with some other things too, like anxiety, trust issues and everything else. But in the anger you're probably talking about is how you respond. And I think that I'm definitely less angry today because it's the empathy that helps me reduce the anger. Because I was more angry when I thought people were doing things to me. You see what I'm saying? Like my father was doing. I was trained to get angry at him because, you know, he was harming me in certain ways for something stupid, you know, or whatever. So if someone did something to me, or I didn't get my reservation on time or whatever, I'd be like this young, you know, whippersnapper getting angry. How dare you do this to me? That's been replaced by empathy. Because as I've been a speaker and consultant in sales and leadership, one of the traits that we see evident in the assessments we do is that the ones who have empathy, a higher degree of empathy than most people, not too high, because then you forget to take care of what you need to take care of for yourself, but high enough. Empathy is the great equalizer from anger. Why? It's so simple. So Scott, you say something to me, right? I all of a sudden create a story as to what I think it means, right?
Yep.
Right. Yep. So when people get angry, the story they're really creating is how you just did something bad to me, right? And then automatically it's a trigger, and you just are trained by that from your life, and you take off, right? Well, before I start doing that now, I start putting myself into that person's mindset and saying, why are they doing that? What's happening in their life that's having them say that to me, or that's having them respond in a certain way. And when you understand that they're going through issues themselves, or there's other reasons for that, then you start trying not to fix them or help them, but it gives you a reason why it's happening. And it starts allowing you to write a different story as to what you think they meant.
Ron, that's hitting hard for me because, you know, having a single mother growing up, it was always don't be treated like a jerk by anybody, Scotty. So that's the way my mind is built. So you're saying when you first start feeling this way, just change the perspective. Just try to get into their mind a little bit, because I've never done that. Right? We're going, why would they, you know, and I think there's an ego thing attached to it of how dare you do this to me, or I'm this or that. And just by changing that, I think you're kind of diminishing a lot of those thoughts. I don't think you can really be angry if you're trying to really undo. You're just trying to, like you're saying, empathize.
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit. So you get triggered, and it's all about triggers. So you get triggered and someone challenges you, hey, stop being an asshole. And then all of a sudden you're trained to respond, what do you mean I'm an asshole? What do you call me an asshole? And then you start letting them go. Versus the second thing, when someone says, hey, stop being an asshole, you may say, well, wait a minute, what did I just say that gave you the impression that I was being an asshole? What did I do to offend you? And then all of a sudden, now the onus is on them to respond, and then they're responding. Then you realize, well, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with me. You know, three other people did that to him, and that's why he was thinking this is where this is going. But whatever the person's saying, also, you start feeling empathy for them. So it's automatically calming you down, and you realize it's not about you. A lot of the times when people get triggered, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what they're going on in their lives. It's like if I speak at an event, right, and I get high level ratings, 4.7 out of 5, whatever. So I can get a 4.7 rating out of this audience of 5s of CEOs, right? And they're all giving me 4s and 5s, except for 2 people that gave me a 2. Right? What do you think I'm thinking about? The 2 people that gave me a 2, because that pissed me off. Like, what did I do? How did I screw this up?
Sure.
Whereas in fact, they're not in the majority. And something probably happened. I may have triggered them with something that I challenged them on or something. But for whatever reason, they gave me a 2. The point is they're giving it to me because of what's in their life and what they're going through, not what's in my life. I'll give you another example, maybe that can clear this up. I was doing this keynote for an executive office company, where they rent offices, to executives who don't have a space, commercial space, a shared office. And keynote went extraordinarily well. It was standing room only. And this woman came up to me at the end, and I told this story about how I started my own business, which is during a family tragedy. And I'm explaining what happened in that tragedy in the keynote. And she came up to me and she said, you know, when you told that story, it brought me back to this point in my life. And I was such a young speaker at that moment that my arrogance in my mind, I didn't say this to her, but I know I said it through some kind of my physical actions because you can't separate the two. My mind was, how can you be so stupid? That wasn't the point of the story. I'm flying back from Seattle. I'm going, what gives you the right to do that? As long as you challenged her and it made her think about something, you did your job. But you can't control exactly how people think. That's not your job. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm talking about. You know, we all get triggered. We all have people trigger us because we create a story. The bottom line is we only created that story. That story is not real. If you don't like it, doesn't serve you well, you can change it.
Beautiful.
But it all depends on how you respond to it.
Exactly. No, and I'm with you too. I'm the same way. It's always just that one bad comment on the podcast or one bad review that just like spins you out. But like you're saying, you have an empty. They're probably going through something you trigger them, and you just kind of got to move on. So now to get to the mindset work. Now velocity mindset. I know I did my diligence. Balance of speed and direction. We're trying to align our professional attainments, our personal attainments. How did this start structuring, and what does the final? Just give me the whole general outline on what the velocity mindset really is.
Well, I was president of the National Speakers Association, which is one of the top trade associations for top thought leaders in the world. And obviously, I didn't expect to even have that as a possibility because when I was a youngster, in addition to what I had from my dad, I had a lot of bullying because I couldn't enunciate the letter R. So I couldn't even pronounce my name, Ron Karr. And I had to go through that. So to become the president of the National Speakers Association some 40 years later, that in itself was a huge victory. But right after I gave it up in June of 2014, when my term was up, I had 9 surgeries, mostly on my back. Tiger Woods had 1 level fused in his back. I have 9 levels fused, but I'm still playing golf today, okay?
Good. That's what I was going to ask. Good.
But it was a tough period for 2 to 3 years, and I couldn't really travel to speak. I was doing consulting, a lot of pain. And you know, when you're laying in bed all that time, you think about your life. And I was 57 at the time, and I thought about my successes, of which I had some great ones, including being president of NSA. And I also had some bad ones. And I asked myself, you know, what stopped me from being where I wanted to be today? Because you know, we're never happy. We always want to be somewhere else. And I went back to my time with my dad, how that held me back. But I still realized that even today, there were things that were preventing me from moving forward because of the stories that I was living with, old stories that weren't true anymore today. And so I started creating some juice inside of me, energy, that said, you know, what a waste it is for anybody to live one day and not achieve the most they can achieve in that day because of stories that aren't serving them well from wherever they came from. So I became dedicated. Oh, and then my life, you know, now I'm 65, so time marches on and we have less and less time as time marches on. So that clock is ticking inside of me. You better get going, buddy, if you want to achieve a couple of these things. And that's where velocity was really building. Now, I had someone come and film me speaking at the University of Texas around 2017. And at that time, I was known for lead sell, get out of the way. But he called me up after that. And I said, you have a new brand. I go, what's that? He goes, Velocity Mindset. And it hit me between the eyes. But I said, how did you get that? He goes, dude, it's all you talk about. And I looked through all your materials and you started writing about it 10 years ago. So I decided if the timing was right for me based on where I was in my life, and I think that there's a need for it. I want people to really get what they want out of this lifetime. And I realize, like everybody else, we're all the same. We get limited by the stories we tell ourselves, but also we're not living life appropriately in the sense that we're more task-driven than purpose-driven. And that's actually where you lose velocity. If I asked you, Scott, what is the first word that comes to your mind, what would it be?
For me, it would be meaning.
No, on velocity, what would be the first
velocity? Go.
Yeah, and that's what most people have. But the problem is, if that's all you have, you're going to have burnout. because we're so busy every day going through the checklist, and we're so busy at the end of the day. Oh man, we didn't have time for lunch. We didn't have time for this, but I got all my to-do list. And then all of a sudden you sit there exhausted saying, how come I didn't move the needle forward that much? So I realized that people think they're acting in a velocity mindset, but they're not. It's actually causing them to lose steam. Velocity, the true physics definition, is speed with direction. Okay. You have to know where you're going. A pilot, if you go to the airport and you want to go to Florida from New York and you ask the pilot where we're going, he goes, wherever the winds take us. Would you stay on that plane? The answer is no. They start with the end in sight. You want to go to Miami from Newark? They start with Miami. What are the 2 or 3 waypoints that if we pass them along the way, we know are on our way to Miami? Then they look at all the potential storms and obstacles, they factor it in, and they come up with a flight plan that gives them the safest and fastest way to get there. We have to be driven by our direction, meaning what is it that we want to accomplish? What is the goal? And once we have that visualized, then we can work our way backwards and figure out what are the milestones that have to happen and what are the tasks that are really important to help me get there. The problem with this is that most people can't figure out where they want to go. If you ask them to visualize their destination, they don't have a lot of the answers. So in my study of leadership and people that have really made it in this world, the one thing I realized about true leaders is their job is not to have all the answers up front. They're okay living with uncertainty. As long as they know where it is that they're going, they have the confidence that they'll ask the right questions that will eventually get them the answers of what they have to do to get there. So A, they figure out where they're going. B, they figure out what they have to do. And C, they don't get upset because they don't have the answers up front. In other words, they stay with it. But where they go now, that direction, you got to be passionate. If you're not really passionate about it, then what happens? Look at the Ukrainians that are fighting. They're passionate. They have no other way to go. They're not going to let the Russians take over the country. There's a passion for them to do whatever it takes. That's the kind of passion we all have to bring to every project we want if we want to see it through. Now, where people make mistakes when they try to figure out where they're going is they will look at the past, because they'll look at the past and the past tells them a story, another story, as to what they think is possible or not possible based on what they were able to achieve before, or based on what their clients were willing to achieve with them. Well, that's all you're doing, then you're limiting your future. All right, and that's why you're only recreating the past then, because you're doing the same thing over and over. No, I want you to start with what we call in the book, the velocity mindset. I want you to start with a clean piece of paper. I want it to come from your gut, not your mind. I want your passion to talk. What is the destiny you want to create for yourself? And put down whatever it looks like. You're not going to have it figured out. Dr. Nita Cobain, who wrote the intro for the book, and he's the president of High Point University, also a fellow president, past president of the National Speakers Association. When he came to this country from Lebanon with $15 in his pocket and settled in High Point, North Carolina, he knew he wanted to be a success, but he didn't know exactly how his life was going to go. As a matter of fact, when I did a live stream with him, I said, Nito, so you knew what you wanted when you came here? He goes, I had an idea, but then what he said was this. He said, the clarity of your vision only comes from walking the journey. So first, get the idea. Be passionate about it. Don't be afraid because you don't have all the answers. Be married to the passion that you want to do it. There's a legitimate reason and you're going to do it. And then go about asking the right questions. You'll start figuring it out and you'll be walking that journey.
Beautiful. So now, because this is something people email me this question, right? They say, Scott, I'm working 9 to 5, but I have this passion, whatever it may be. Let's use speaking, right? Because this is something I would say, Ron, that my journey is taking me towards that way. You go, I don't freaking know where to start. Like so let's say, we'll use the New York to Miami, gist of it for the goal. Would your goal, how defined does that goal have to be if you're also at the same point going to clarify it on your way there? Is that how you just make those small steps incrementally and then the goal will kind of show up itself once you're taking massive action?
Yes, I did it maybe the longer way, the shorter ways. So when I started my business in '88, it was because of a family tragedy. And basically, my dad was terminally ill. My mother was a senior VP at Chase Manhattan Bank, doing world trade, traveling around the world. She took care of my dad, had help, but she didn't take care of herself mentally. And one day she passed out at the wheel of the car, coming home from work, 4 blocks from the house. The car jumped the curb, severed a light pole. The jagged edge of the pole punctured the gas tank. The car caught fire. She caught fire right in front of a Porsche dealership of all places. A salesperson, customer come out, they drag her out in flames. The car blows, taking down the entire Porsche dealership. And in an instant, I had 2 parents near death. So I said to myself, okay, now what do? I'm an EMT at that time. I was riding ambulance for Fair Lawn, New Jersey, where the accident happened. The police department said, just go straight to the hospital. And I said, okay, what? I was sitting there stunned in the ER. And my mother had 3rd-degree burns on 30% of her body. We didn't know if she was going to make it. And I asked myself, okay, what do? I have no clue. And I said, okay, well, go back to business. What made you successful in business? And there was always these 2 questions that I lived by. What is it that I want to achieve? What does success look like to me? And are my actions supporting it? So at that moment, it became very crystal clear what success was going to be, that both parents were going to survive no matter what. I did not want it on my conscience that one didn't survive because I wasn't good enough to make it happen. I didn't want to live with that guilt. That was my passion, keep them alive, not just for me, but for them. And then I swore to myself, okay, you're going to have a lot of stuff coming at you, liability, lawyers, doctors, all this stuff. And I made myself a promise. The only activities that I'm going to do for the next few weeks are the ones that are germane to keeping both parents alive. Everything else is going to wait. So I didn't get diverted. I didn't get emotionally diverted. And it worked, we took care of my mother and my father. My father lived for another year. My mother had 3 skin graft operations, survived, and went back to work in 6 months. And that's how that happened. Now, at the same time, a month after the event, I was exhausted. I was living in my car, and I had to give a business plan presentation to my executive team. Well, Scott, business plans and sales are half creative and half real, right? Sure. I didn't have the creative juices going on. I called up my EVP and I said, you know what happened? He goes, yeah, you're okay. I said, yes. I said, but what this taught me is life's too short. This job is not making sense for me. Similar to what happened to a lot of people in COVID. And he goes, well, what do you think? And I gave him 4 options, 3 of which meant I was going to be realigned and do something else in that company. Or the last one that I go on my own. He goes, well, I can't do the first 3, but if you went on your own, what would you do? I said, I don't know. My distributors can't sell the way I have a paper hat. Maybe I'll do some sales training. He goes, give me a business plan. So I did. And he goes, okay, today's your last day. It was July of '88. I'll keep you an expense account to the end of the year. I'll pay your commissions to the end of the year. He was basically giving me seed money. And he said, go ahead and do your thing. And I got my first client in 2 weeks. Now, did I really map out what a training company was? No, I had no clue what I was going for. All I knew is I was doing this as part of my job. Let me see if I can make a living. And I started making a living doing it. And then someone introduced me to the National Speakers Association. So I went there and I said, wow, there's more to this than that. I could be a keynote speaker. And I said, wow, that really interests me. Let me go do that. And I started learning the skill sets of that. And then I became a consultant. But it was all around one thing that was gelling, which was how to build a high performing sales culture. That was the thing that was driving me. That's what I always did. And what can I bring to companies that are not doing that? And how can I help them do that? So, when I started my business, I had no idea what the National Speakers Association was. I didn't know about it, right? It came through my talking to people, asking questions, where would you go? Now, if you ask me today, Scott, for you, let's say you have an interest in becoming a speaker, I'd say, okay, like in New York, there's a big chapter in New York of NSA. I definitely go to NSA, see what it's like, start talking to people that are in it so you get some ideas. So you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. If you need to learn how to speak or do certain things, you may do the Speaker University program that they have. Start getting an idea for what topics, give you the juice, and then you build on that. But you have an idea. You already have the idea. You already have the passion. You want to go and be a purveyor of the spoken word that moves people to action. Now the question is how to do that. And don't worry about if you don't have those answers. You can find those answers. That's the message.
Ron, I was going to ask you that after this conversation. So thank you for telling me.
What was that?
I said I was going to ask you this after our interview. Like, what's the first couple steps I should take? And I'll tell you quickly. I had debilitating stage fright since I was like 13 years old. And I said, when I turned 30, this was 2 years ago, I said, I'm going to get over it. And I've been doing stand-up comedy ever since. So it's gone, the stage fright, but now comedy's a different thing. It's more just, I need something that connects me more with human beings on a deeper level instead of like being a monkey and, laugh. And so, wow, I feel like you're meant to come on this show, Ron. That's so cool. Now,
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Now the question I want to ask you is, people, and we could use speak and use any goal. There's usually some sort of fear, resistance, whatever you want to call that. How do people eliminate that part of this? Is it about eliminating? Is it about walking right through it? How do people eliminate that resistance?
Some people have more fear than others in certain things. Barbra Streisand had severe stage fright. That's why she stopped performing. Right? It wasn't because she can't sing. She's one of the best singers in the world. Right? Yeah. I had fright. I still do. Except the fright for me is, and I tell speakers this, is that, look, if you start getting really nervous before a talk, especially if you've been doing it, you're getting out of sync. You're not in sync with the audience. Now, one thing you say to get yourself over that is saying, look, why am I here? They brought you in for a reason. What did they bring you in for? They want me to tell my story and how to sell or how to lead. They want me to share my particular ideas because they think, so just go share your ideas. That's all you have to do. That's what the audience needs. When you become too self-focused and you got to be the best speaker they ever heard, that's when you're going to bomb, because no one can live under that pressure. But when you go up there saying, hey, this is what the audience needs, I did my due diligence, and I'm just going to go in there and help them and be there for them, then you're going to come across differently and you won't be as nervous. Now, will you never be nervous? I can't say that. I mean, we're all nervous. And it's a good thing, because if you look at it, another way of looking at it is not that you're fearful. Another way of looking at it is that you value people's time. You want to make sure they get what they came for.
Exactly.
Right. And even the singers, even the football players, when they go out in the Rose Bowl and they go out in the Super Bowl, they'll all tell you how they're vomiting on the sidelines, because they're so nervous. But once you're out there and you get going, you stop thinking about it. So it's normal. And when they asked Bob Hope, how do you get rid of the butterflies? He said, you don't. You just get them to fly in formation.
Exactly. That's what I realized doing this, because, my stage fright it was like I would get on stage as a kid in high school, and my hands would shake and I'd sweat and not that happens anymore, but now it's like the stage fright doesn't go down. Your courage gets higher. And that's the way I look at it. Like, this is there. Now you just kind of got to man up to it and go through it. Cause the way I started looking at it, it's fight or flight, right? Am I in danger? And just by saying, go ahead.
I would rather have someone be a little nervous because it means they care about it, than someone who's been doing it so much and says, bad or like me or don't, it's up to them. I'd rather have the first one than the latter. Right.
And even with comedy, that stuff you're saying is ringing so hard to me, because the second you're in your head when you're performing, you're dead, because everybody feels it. But if you start giving and start looking at people really like just getting into them and into the whole thing, like you're mindful and I got to do a lot of mindfulness practice, and that has changed the game for me, because I stopped making it about me. It's not about you, jerk. It's about everybody else. It's about you giving and doing what you're truly meant to do. That's so cool.
And people know when you're there for them versus there for yourself. They know it.
That's right. Now, tell me how much a setback really, really means to you, and intuition. What do those play in a factor of whatever that, going after your goal is? Because obviously I've had those when I'm doing my stand-up comedy. When you bomb, you bomb. When you do great, Caroline's down here on Broadway, crushed it, 350 people. But then there's the other side of it. How do you handle the comeback, so to speak?
I'm going through it right now. I had a new VA company we were using and it's not really working out. So I'm looking for another one, but I'm hesitant to pull any triggers because I've spent so much money on online marketing and everything else and didn't get the return that I want. I mean, I literally could be a very wealthy individual right now today beyond what I am. And I'm hesitant because of all those setbacks. But what you have to do is you can't be afraid to move forward again. You have to make sure it's aligned to where you want to go. And then ask yourself, what did you learn from the last one? Now, the reality is we're all going to fail more than we succeed. Let me say it again. We're all going to fail more than we succeed. You look at your top successful people, they failed more than they succeeded, okay? An example, a baseball player, right? So a 300 hitter means that they get 3 hits out of every 10 at bats. That's a high failure rate. You can strike out 7 times miserably and get 3 hits, and you're considered a hero now. And they're being paid many millions of dollars. The point is, those baseball players who come to the plate, they're not concentrating on why they struck out 7 times or didn't get a hit. They're only going for those 3 hits because they know that's a good rate, and they know that that will keep them in good stead in terms of the fans and the money. So don't concentrate on the failures, but when it does happen, ask yourself, what can I learn from it? And if you could learn something from a failure, that's what we call a good failure versus a bad failure. So early on in my speaking career, I would do role plays. I still do. And there's one multinational company, the different divisions brought me in. I became a hero. I helped one company change the way that industry bought. They got a $200 million contract. I walked in water. And there's one division brought me in, and I happened to be the only division that was actually kicking off a profit. What I didn't realize is those salespeople were older, veterans, and they felt disenchanted because they weren't getting credit for being the one division that was successful. And then all of a sudden in comes this Yahoo speaker, me, who's going to teach me how to sell a price increase so I can raise my prices even more. Like, I don't know how to do that. So they were already set not to have a good time. And I come in and I do role play in the first half day, and I'm critiquing them, not because I'm being mean. I thought I wanted to help them. Well, they were already loaded for bear before I got there. All I did was put them over the edge where they started coming at me. It was not a good thing. Let's put it this way. At the end of the second day, I'm from New York. This was in Philadelphia.
Oh boy.
I had curse words put on that paper that I didn't even know what they meant.
Oh God. Yeah, they put the Philly people on. It's the worst, Ron.
So I was devastated. And I was just like 5 years into my career, and I go, oh my God, I'm in the wrong career. So I did something that we all have to do, because remember, now I'm spiraling downwards. I'm in a story. I'm a failure. This is no good. I'll never be good. You got to get yourself out of that as fast as you can, because if you let it go too fast, it's hard to get out of. So I'm sitting in a parking lot after I walked out of there, and I called one of my good clients. Why? Because we became lifelong friends. He trusted me. I trusted him. I did great work for him. I shared what happened, and he asked me this one question. He said, okay, what'd you learn from it? I didn't learn anything from it. I can't tell you, and I'm emotional. He goes, it'll come to you. Keep asking that question. And it did. 2 weeks later, it came to me. After I got the anger down so I could start thinking about it clearly, I asked myself, okay, what did not go right in that situation? And I realized I didn't do my due diligence right. They felt disenchanted. They felt that they were saving the company. And all I was doing was critiquing them, embarrassing them in front of their people as to how they could do it better. And I realized that the one thing a speaker has to do, no matter what, is create a safe environment for the audience. Never, ever, ever put anybody in a bad light. So I asked myself, how can I do a role play, but do it from a different perspective? And that's where now I found this solution that now when I do it, people love it. They really do love it. It becomes one of the main things I do in the main stage when I'm doing leadership or sales. I'll bring 2 people up. They'll create the situation so it's not scripted. As they started, one person plays the leader, one person plays the employee or the sales and customer, whatever. And after about 30 seconds, I say, stop, take the person playing the influencer, turn my mic off, say, start it again just ask this one question first. They'll start it on a different tack, and they get into an entirely different conversation than they did the first time. And all I just do is look at the audience and say, what's the difference? So those two people actually become the heroes. They are doing the transformation. The audience is telling everybody what was different. They themselves are two people I'm interviewing what was different for you. And then I also bring in what actually happened in their brains by looking at the neuroscience findings of the hormones. And I explain how it works, and they get it. And what the audience gets out of that transformation is they understand that they really do have the power to dictate that their actions can create a good environment or a bad environment to getting people engaged, that they do have the power to get people engaged. They saw it right then and there. So now they're motivated to leave that talk and go try it. That would never have come out if I didn't have that failure.
And it's just so funny because we started this talk about empathy. That sounds like the beginnings of the workings of empathy and putting yourself in other people's perspective. So you never would have been able to get to this level without having that failure.
Exactly. And that's a great point you bring up, Scott. But here's the point. It starts with what we talked about first in your meeting. I couldn't get to that answer when Bud asked me, what did you learn? Because the anger was consuming me.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you cannot think clearly when anger is consuming you. You have to work through it and let it go to be able then to be empathetic and say, okay, what went wrong? Because otherwise you're afraid to look at anything of what you could have done wrong because you're angry about the situation. You think somebody did something to you. You're not thinking about what was my contribution. And actually, that's one of the premises of the new book, The Velocity Mindset. First of all, everybody's a leader. So you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. We lead our lives, we lead our children, our significant others, ourselves. We're all leaders. And the couple of premises of the book is, what would the world look like if everybody acted like a leader and not a victim of circumstance? Let me say it again. What would the world look like if everybody acted like a leader and not a victim of circumstance? When you are angry, you're acting as a victim of circumstance. When you're a leader, you're then asking yourself another question. What could I do differently next time? Before you start blaming anybody or anything else.
That is what is needed in today's society. Let me tell you, Ron. Those are words well said. Well, let me tell you, Ron, this has been just a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me. I'm going to read the book. You got me hooked. I'm in it, Ron. So everybody can find a link to Velocity Mindset below, all Ron's work below. Anything else you want to talk about, Ron, or anything else coming up?
If they go to velocitymindset.com, they can actually take a free leadership assessment. It'll ask them 5 questions, but you'll get immediately some tips and recommendations on how you can move forward in your life. And, don't get hung up on the word leadership. It's really about what's holding you back that you can get forward. That's what this book is really about. And so what we do is every Friday, we send out an e-zine to our list with videos on the Velocity Mindset so you stay in the conversation. So when you go to velocitymindset.com, we get your email, and then you can count on being in that conversation going forward.
Beautiful. Ron, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Scott. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. YouTube, if you're listening, smash that subscribe button. People, if you're listening, leave a like, review. More importantly, just tell one of your friends. It'll go a long way. Thank you guys so much as always. Stay safe, stay positive, stay blessed. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Cause